Jonathan Hassel, meer dan 10 jaar expert, autoriteit op het gebied van digitale toegankelijkheid. Hij is ook de hoofdauteur van het Britse document, ik heb dat echt moeten opzoeken, BS8878. The British Standard on Embedding Accessibility Within Organizations. En het interessante van dat document is dat het in Engeland is ontwikkeld, maar dat langzamerhand als standaard wereldwijd wordt gepakt. En daar zal Jonathan ons zo meteen in meenemen. Dat is ook interessant. I'm a huge fan of the BBC iPlayer, but you were responsible for that project, isn't it?
I did accessibility on that, yeah, originally.
Okay, please give him a big applause, Professor Jonathan Hassel.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning. Thank you that I can speak in English and I don't have to use my Dutch. It's really not there. So I hope you will understand everything that I want to say this morning. So yeah, embedding accessibility. I wanted to say one thing first. I've got a fair amount in my presentation. We will get the slides to you one way or another, so don't feel like you have to take everything in. The other thing is, I wanted to kind of like advertise my session this afternoon. So this morning I'm going to give you the highlights, the headings of what there is here. And then at 1:30 this afternoon, we have an hour downstairs, smaller group, more ability to answer questions. I don't know what it is that you need, and I would love to give you what you need if I know it. I can do that at 1:30. So what it would be really helpful for me is that if you could tweet questions through. So I've got the hashtag wrong, so it's NCDT16, not the 20. If you put @John Hassel, that's me, there in your tweet, what I'll do between this session and the next one, I'll try and change my presentation for this afternoon to answer the questions that you ask. Does that sound okay? So feel free to tweet at any point whilst I'm speaking or later. I say a little bit about me. I've been doing this for a long time. That's what I looked like 10 years ago, before I got so grey. I've been working about 16 years in this. I wrote the UK accessibility standards, mostly based on my experience at the time of doing accessibility at the BBC. I now am the accessibility director of a company called Open Inclusion in the UK. We're advising some of the world's largest companies, but also some of the smallest ones as well, on how to embed accessibility in what they do. Quite recently, and one of the reasons why I'm here today, is we made a decision that it might be a sensible thing for us to take the British standard and turn it into an ISO standard. So I guess the thing that I'm most interested about today is hearing from you. Are the sorts of things that I talk about in my session actually going to be helpful to organizations here in the Netherlands? Is there anything that we need to do different because of differences in culture? That sort of thing. That's what we're doing. So any comments on that, any time today, just grab me, and that will be very helpful for me. So I wanted to start off with the good news from the perspective of people who care about accessibility, and I'm guessing there are a number of people in the room who do. Accessibility is in demand. You've just heard what's happening here in the Netherlands about the legal situation. That's happening globally. Large companies are taking accessibility increasingly seriously. In fact, there is a lack of people who understand this. Skills in accessibility are becoming more and more valuable for companies. Companies are having trouble finding the right people to hire. So if you are good at accessibility or if you are passionate about it, now is a good time. The skills that you have are potentially very, very marketable. So you could be an accessibility superhero. I just wanted to show you just a little bit of video as to what your future might look like. And for those in the room who have a vision impairment, I'm going to try audio describing this live with my voice. Let's see how this works, shall we? So, we have New York City. It's a beautiful day. It's not raining like it was yesterday. There's the Empire State Building. It's looking just glorious. The camera pans up and we see a superhero. He's got a red cape. The camera pans out over him and you realize that he's on the edge of a building. The superhero cape flies out and he has wings. People on the ground below are looking up. They're amazed. He's impressive. He's really impressive. He's going to do something amazing. He's looking down at them and he jumps. People below are cheering. They think it's amazing. He's soaring down towards them. Life is fabulous. He's crashed into the car at the bottom there. So, we don't want that to be your experience of how to take the passion that you have in wanting accessibility to happen, and that being the experience of what happens. The bad news is nobody makes it on their own. So I'm guessing there's people in this room, having spoken to people who've been here in previous years, you may have had successes in bringing accessibility as a quality to your work, and maybe your colleagues' work. But you've probably also had numerous frustrations when the products that you were creating didn't quite live up to your values. And that was probably because the people you were working with didn't share those values. Or maybe it was too late and too difficult to get what you wanted done. I'm guessing that most people in the room want to do less work and have more impact. And that's what I'm trying to talk about today. I think we want to go from a world which is all about checklists, things like WCAG, making sure that we've done everything right, into one that values inclusive, user-centered design, which is about people. It's about whether or not people can get the right experience of the products that we're creating. If you like, it's everything that Jerry's going to be saying in half an hour when I've finished, for everyone. The problem is, you need to engage everyone in your organization who makes the products, not just the accessibility superhero, to make that work. You can't do this on your own. If I gave you a magic wand, you still wouldn't be able to do it. Most people work in organizations where there are a huge number of people working on your side. It's just not going to work. Two things that could happen. You'll eventually burn out as you're trying to run around solving everyone's problems for them, and you'll leave. So that's bad for you, and it's bad for the organization you work for. Or you're one of those amazingly brilliant people. You'll manage. You'll do it, and then you'll get bored and look for another challenge. So that's good for you, but bad for your organization. Either way, we're not getting to where we want to be. You see, being good at accessibility, I don't think is really enough. You need to convince others to join you. And you need to know how to make your collaboration successful. Is everyone pointing in the same way, working together to make something great? Because you see, what I believe is that actual success in accessibility looks like this. It's not doing a job to make a product accessible, although that's good. It's not enabling all your organization's products to be accessible, although that's good. You should prepare the organization for your exit. Success should be measured on whether or not they can still carry on without you, and that what you've brought has become just the way we do things around here, where no one left can remember your name. That is how we define success at Open Inclusion, the company that I run. We go in, we help organizations, we try and embed knowledge, capability, all of the things I'm going to talk about this morning, and then we leave. Because there are not enough people who are skilled in this to go around. So effectively, this is all about trying to empower organizations to get this right. So if we're not those organizations at the moment, how do we get there from here? Which is part of what BS 8878, the British Standards in Accessibility that we created, was trying to do. And I'm going to give you just a flavor of it this morning, the 4 E's, just to try and help you to remember. Expand, embed, enable, and look at the effects. So we have just a little while to go through all of those. So firstly, expand. Find your organization's accessibility motivation sweet spot. You see, if all of those people have an impact on the accessibility of a project, then you need to motivate all of them. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can convert the person at the top and then just let the delegation go down. Or you can try and convert everybody. And that generally tends to start with the developers and then the testers, maybe the designers come on board, maybe someone from legal. Trying to get everybody to understand why they should do this is not easy because of this quote. This is J.R.R. Tolkien. He didn't just do The Lord of the Rings, he said some really great things. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to us. So let's be very, very clear. When people go into work, they're incredibly busy. And if we're saying you now need to do any of the stuff that I'm talking about today, then they're going to need to know how that works with SEO, with security, with all of the other things they're trying to do. Why should you do this? So there are effectively 4 reasons. We've heard something about the legal reasons this morning, but I'm going to look at ethical reasons, reasons around return on investment and innovation. Because you see, I think what's happened in the past is when we've looked at the legal reasons, it's kind of trying to avoid losing. It's kind of like the insurance policy approach to accessibility. And nobody, even people who sell insurance policies, are really that keen on them. Now, if it's about avoiding losing, it's not going to get you out of bed in the morning. You get out in bed in the morning to win. And you define it in whatever terms you want. So success, in terms of motivation, is firing on all 4 cylinders. So let's look and see how you would do this for different types of organizations. So most organizations care about the legal side of things. Nobody wants to be sued, so that's a fairly good start for everybody. Some organizations care about the ethical side of things. They want to make sure that nobody is excluded from being able to use the products they have. Certainly, if you're in a government organization, that really works. Retail organizations do not want to lose customers. They don't want anybody to fall out of the checkout process when they're trying to buy something. So therefore, if people are falling out because they have a disability and it isn't accessible, that's money being wasted. So if you have a retail organization, it's a great place to look. And then people who are creating products, especially if they have competitors, are always trying to work out where the innovation is. A huge amount of innovation has come from looking at the needs of people with impairments over time. Think of the typewriter initially, Siri. All sorts of things are actually coming from that community. Thinking different enables you to think more innovative. So depending on your sort of organization that you work for, different motivations could be there. Just looking at the types of people in the organization who you might want to get on side. People who are into compliance are going to be interested in the legal case. Corporate social responsibility. So the PR department of your business, how well is it being, if you like, a citizen of the country? Well, certainly they're interested in the ethics side of things. Product managers are always desperate to get more people. So if you can say, well, hey, I've got 20% of the potential customers for your product, and actually you may not be servicing their needs well, they'll be interested in why that is. And everybody in corporate strategy wants the organization to be more innovative. It's what makes organizations fly in the future. So looking at what the motivations are and matching them to the people in front of you is a great start to try and get people on board. We'll come on to embed. So embedding competence across the organization. If you like, we've now got people to want to do this, hopefully. So how can they do this? So it really comes down to your staff and your policies. Are they facilitating or inhibiting your ability to deliver products that work for everybody? And so a number of things that you might want to embed, some headlines here. Responsibility, competence and confidence, support, policy, governance. So looking at responsibility. If I were to ask you whose responsibility it is to make your website accessible, would you know? And if I were to ask the other people who work in your organization the same question, would they come up with the same answer? The problem is that it's everybody's responsibility, so therefore it's nobody's responsibility. You need to work out somebody whose responsibility it ultimately is, and then you need to work from there. So we always try and get an executive champion, someone as high up in the organization as possible, to get buy-in that this is a good thing to do, and to get budget. But that's the person who says yes. The person who does the doing, we term an accessibility program manager. And they're the person who would, if you like, try and implement the strategy that we're going to go through. And then everything should be delegated down. Responsibility should be everybody's. So if we sorted out responsibility, then how do people discharge their responsibilities? And the way we tend to think about this is to look at clear guidelines. Now, everyone, I'm guessing, knows about things like WCAG. WCAG is great, but it's very, very impenetrable for a lot of people, mostly because all of those different people on the team, if we just take the people at the bottom, visual designers, developers, writers, all of the things that they need to do are jumbled up all in WCAG. If you can spread them out, if you can say, these people need to do these 4 things, these people need to do these 50 things, then things are a lot better. So splitting them up by job role is a really great way of going forwards. And then making sure people are trained. And I always say you never, ever should train people in accessibility. What you should do is to train people in their responsibilities for accessibility. No designer needs to know anything about how HTML works with respect to accessibility. They need to know what they need to do. And if you've got a large organization, you need to try and work out who has the most impact for accessibility. And those are the people you need to train most. So to give you an example, I mentioned earlier the 5 things that visual designers needed to do and about the 50 things that developers needed to do. So it's pretty much a good idea that you train your developers because they've got so much further to go than everyone else. As I say, just trying to not boil the ocean, but trying to be very strategic about how you do things. Look at support. Nobody does it on their own. Maybe you need people supporting from the outside. Identifying the competencies that need to be in-house and the competencies that need to be outside. So, for example, train your staff in the things that don't change. So it's most of the web stuff. But all of the new things, so for example, if you were trying to make an Apple Watch app accessible, that's probably the sort of place where you might want to bring in some outside consultants because it's entirely possible that the Apple Watch won't take off the way you want and all of the knowledge that you've generated on that project won't be helpful in the future. So know what you need in-house and know what it's useful to bring in other people to help you with. I would suggest keep quality assurance in-house and outsource accessibility audits. We'll come on to that in a little while. And get, as I say, make sure you don't become dependent on externals. If you look at places where they've been doing a huge amount of accessibility, biggest place is the United States. They have huge accessibility companies, and a lot of the companies, the organizations who are trying to do accessibility are completely dependent on those suppliers. You don't get dependent on a supplier if you think that's an important thing for your business. So try and work out what's important and make sure that you're not having to pay for this year on year on year. Start getting good at it internally. That will be useful. Embedding into key policies. There's a lot of policies that you might have in your organization. Here are a few. A procurement policy, a technology policy, marketing guidelines, style guides, component libraries, how you use JavaScript. Each one of these things has an impact on the accessibility of your products. You know, for example, if you choose the wrong JavaScript library, you may not be able to make your product accessible. It's as simple as that. So it would be a good idea to think about that when you're doing it. Marketing guidelines. If you choose a particular color to be the color of your logo, and that isn't good for people with a disability, it's a bit too late to do that. Sort of like after you spent €500,000 on that branding agency. Have it in there. And that is what we believe that, if you like, an accessibility policy should be. It's not a document which is one thing. It's actually a combination of where you've taken this value and placed it throughout the policies of your organization. If your policies work for you, because you've thought about these things at the start, that's great. Hopefully it's making sense. Embedding governance. So why am I showing you a quilt? Well, so you need somebody to say yes or no. You need somebody to, yes, okay, to say that things have to be this way. You have to get things right. You also have probably got a lot of products that you're creating. Even if you've got, if you like, a single product, you will have your website, maybe your mobile app. You will certainly have lots of sort of social media channels. How, which of those are more important than others? Categorizing your projects and saying what's most important for your users and what's most important for you, and if you like, spending time on the most important things. I'm going to move on from there, but effectively what we're talking here is benchmarking your organization and saying on all of these different scales, how well are we doing at the moment? How well do we think we want to be doing? And if you like, what are the cost benefits of all of those things? If we've only got a certain amount of time and budget, where should we be spending that? Okay, moving on to enabling accessibility for a product through a consistent process. So why a process? Well, what tends to happen in accessibility is that people fix problems in the product. Somebody complains about something and they fix the product. They then do a version 2 of the product, and all of the problems are there again, because you fixed it in the product, not the process. You need to take it through and to make it efficient. So everybody should know what they need to do and how to deliver that when you're creating a website, a mobile app, whatever it is you're doing. And it should be flexible. We're not saying change your processes. We're saying actually make accessibility work for you. There are certain things that you need, embed them in what you're already doing. Because a lot of what happens is people do accessibility too late and then try to fix things when things are very expensive. That's not what you do for anything else. You've got stuff here today about Agile. Everyone's working in sprints. Trying to do testing as we go through. So if that's the case, if that's what everyone's doing, and we do different types of testing at different points, then why is it that we only do so very few tests for accessibility when there are lots of different ones out there? Again, if you want more on that, I can give you more this afternoon. The other thing is we often do things at the last minute, and just to give you an example, we worked out that if you do that, if you do all of your accessibility work and all of the auditing late on, you'll find you have to do lots of re-auditing because you'll find all of the problems. And in general, it's at least 1.4 times the cost in terms of people or resources that you would need anyway. We're shooting ourselves in the foot, people. We don't want to do that. So 4 workshops to embed accessibility in projects. And the way we tend to do this is we introduce them backwards. Because most organizations already have projects in train. So we start with the end in mind. Workshop number 4. How do you know your product's accessibility is good enough for launch? This is the big thing for everyone. Put in a very simple terms, you're almost at launch. You have lots of open issues for accessibility still. What do you do? Well, I know the one thing you would really want to do is not get into that situation in the first place. But this workshop handles that. So if you're interested in that, we can do some of that later. So workshop 3 says, okay, earlier on in the process, how do you handle test results and prioritize how you fix things? If you like, in terms of the timeline of a project, if you're in maybe sprint 8 of a 10-sprint project, you've got issues there. Which ones of them do you prioritize? But again, wouldn't it be great that you didn't have 60 issues because you sorted this at the start. So how do we make sure that we embed it in the implementation and test planning? As I say, we want to have something that looks like the one at the top there, where it's not, you've trained your staff and you find the bugs that they're creating as you go through, because a quality assurance person is sitting next to the person creating the code, that sort of thing, rather than waiting. And then workshop 1, how to start the project on firm foundations. Not everything is the same. WCAG was designed for everything, but it was designed before mobile. So it's not going to, your product may not fit that particular mold very well. You need to make some strategic decisions about how far you're going to go with accessibility on the project, the sort of technologies you're using. So if you are doing the Apple TV app, how do you make that accessible? Is WCAG the right thing, or will that completely be sort of for web and something else? How do you pick the right tools for the job? And then those will be based on key aspects of the project. So you may be creating something, for example, for one audience. You could be creating something for people with dementia, for example. You might take different approaches if you knew that. So thinking about your project as if it's the only one in the world, that really helps you focus on how you're going to do things. So that's getting into the process, and then just the last bit, because this is so important. Once you get great at accessibility and you've got it into your organization, things can still go wrong. This is my little boy not driving our car. This is a 2003 Ford Focus. He's only 5 in this photo, so he wasn't driving, he was playing. This is the most inclusively designed mainstream car ever. It's the 2003 model. When I was at Google last year, I had the 2015 model Focus. That is not the most inclusively designed car in the world. What happened? Somebody came along and said, yeah, I just don't like the way it looks. Loads of people loved it, but this person thought that they were better than all of those users. Oh, absolutely, I'm saying they lost focus. And the person who actually put in all of that user-centered design is now very bitter, unfortunately. What you've got to do is to make sure your organization feels that all of this work pays off. So you need to look at that. You can look at things like, well, okay, if this is an insurance policy, what are we being insured against? What penalties are potentially out there? There are a few examples from the States and Australia. The biggest one, even if you don't have the law, is brand reputation. This is a press release saying that BMI Baby, an airline in the UK, had served legal proceedings because it didn't work for blind people. They had already lost BMI Baby when that came out. It didn't matter if they won the lawsuit, they'd already lost the PR battle. That's a huge amount of PR time spent dealing with that problem. As I say, if people don't understand the value of the premium, how much it costs to get the insurance until you claim, are there other things you can do? Well, there's positive PR. Apple are forever saying how brilliant they are at accessibility. They are not the best company in the world at accessibility. They just have a PR department who knows how to sell it. Learn from that. Minimizing customer complaints. How, if you got your product to be great for disabled people, so you didn't have to monitor things like the Ali fail hashtag and deal with the PR problems for when somebody says in public your website is inaccessible, you'll be saving a lot of money. You could also have situations, we work with a lot of banks, they're taking a lot of what they used to do in call centers online. But if your online is inaccessible, you still need the call center open. That's an alternative. That's legal. It's also incredibly expensive. It would probably be easier and cheaper to make the website more accessible so you could close down the call center. Just one last thing. SEO is brilliant at this. How they sell their benefits is they establish the relative value of Google rankings. They benchmark your current ranking. If I were an SEO person, I would say, tell us where you want to rank. I'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And you don't pay me until I get you there. We can benchmark the whole thing because we have the data. We do not do that in accessibility at the moment, and that is making the whole thing suffer. In our organization, Open Inclusion, we are doing this. We are literally being able to go to our companies and saying, because of that accessibility problem, you are losing this number of people who could have bought that product. And that is the sort of thing that really works. So some takeaways. Make it we, not me, not just you, it's the whole team. Tailored ways of motivating your staff. Buy-in from the top. Training needs to be job specific. Embed in policies. Make it repeatable by embedding in a process. And prove it's worth to keep it going. Because otherwise you might get everything you want and then a couple of years later there's nothing left. I've been doing this all over the world. I've interviewed lots of people. There's free videos available if you pop through to this. It's all part of what I did behind the book I created. And the thing that I want to leave you with today is we're taking this British standard and we're making it an international standard. So how would this be most useful here in the Netherlands? I'd be really interested in your questions. We have maybe a little bit of time now, and we certainly have lots of time at 1:30 in Zaal Amethyst.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah. Jonathan, I was reading the standard, and I was wondering, isn't the document another formal document that will result in more bureaucracy?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yes. If you like, I mean, if you think about it, there's good bureaucracy and bad bureaucracy is what I would say. Agile and the move from waterfall to agile has been based on trying to get rid of bureaucracy from the process. And I've worked on projects where they've gone completely too far. So everything is now, they have a different type of bureaucracy. Because they don't have any documents anymore, but they also can't do any training because all the developers have a velocity that they need to get through to do their Jira tickets. I see people nodding. So literally, there's good bureaucracy and bad bureaucracy. There's things that help the project and things that don't. And what I would suggest is that where the bureaucracy comes in is where, comply or explain. Here we are in Holland. If you like, one of the things about BS 8878 was we had a very similar thing in saying the only times you would need to write those documents is where you think it doesn't make sense for your project to do those things. So, simplest example, if you were doing a video-based website, audio description is incredibly expensive to do, and very, very few people benefit from it. So in terms of cost benefits, it really is not a sensible thing for an organization to do lots of. The best standard in the world is my old employer, the BBC. They do 20% of the TV programs with audio description, and yet WCAG wants you to do every single bit of video on your site. You can't do that. So you would need to then explain. That's the type of bureaucracy which is useful to say,
thanks.
To do that sort of thing.
Questions? Any questions from the audience? Nobody? Okay, yeah?
I have a question about the Brexit. Do you think it will have a positive or negative effect on accessibility?
On accessibility? That's a really good question, golly. I try and stay out of politics most of the time. You know what? I'd like Europe, personally. I grew up in Dover. It was easier to get to France than it was to get to London. I've personally benefited hugely from the European project, as it were. I think some things that Europe does is very good for accessibility. So I think some of the harmonisation that is trying to happen is good. I would have to say, actually, BS 8878 almost never happened because I remember going to a conference in Frankfurt where I had to battle for them to understand that this was not us recreating WCAG. They didn't want any national standards. So I think Yeah, I think if Brexit happens, would it be good for accessibility? No. I think it's better if we work together. I think that comes through pretty clearly in my presentation. And if you look at what's happening in accessibility across the whole of the globe, what we're all trying to do is to have one set of standards, rules, guidelines, call them what you will, that helps us all go forward. So, yeah, I think better to stay in. And let's hope they let us.
Yeah. Okay, another one. Yeah, the last one.
You try and convince a lot of companies to act on their accessibility. Do you think a sanction model isn't better than a comply and explain model? Because otherwise, a lot of the momentum always leave companies, and they end up, the way you describe them, not being accessible 2 years from now.
Yeah, so sanctions. Yeah, I mean, the law is useful. The law is not enough. Back to those four business cases. The law requires you if the law requires you to do something, and the thing you would want to do is to make sure that you don't get sued. So what you do is the minimum possible to make sure that doesn't happen. A lot of the time, that doesn't actually help the people that we're trying to help. We work with all sorts of different organizations, and those who are purely motivated by legal reasons, it's the first thing we do is we try and shift them up. Because if they can start understanding that it's good for them as a business, that is something that is much more motivating than the law. The law is useful, but I think everyone's experience of it is that, I don't know, go and talk to the folks in Norway, but most places, they have a law and they do nothing with it. In the UK, we've had a law since 1999 that's applied to the web, and we do not have one case study. Nothing has come to court. A lot has been settled out of court. So a law buys you a little bit, but not very much. What really works is when you can get an organization that says, we're doing this because this is good for our business. You go talk to Tim Cook, and you ask why they do all of the accessibility at Apple and all of the innovation that's come from it. That's the stuff that really works. Laws are kind of the worst reason to do accessibility, but it's still better than none.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for your presentation. Jonathan.